First of all, thank you all for being out here tonight. I'm here, my name is Ashwin Ashokan, I'm a product manager at Spotify, and I'm here to talk to you today about how to navigate the landscape of being a product manager, some of the challenges that come with it. So real quick run through tonight's agenda. So I'll give you a little bit about my background, kind of how, how I started getting interested in creation and being a product person, and my transition through like management consulting and then getting here. Then we'll talk a little bit about what is a product manager. We're not going to try to define it, but we're just going to discuss it a little bit. Then we'll talk about product vision and product strategy, what that means and why that's important for you to be successful in product management. Then once you draft those things, we'll talk about how to execute them effectively. And then we'll get to the challenges that I spoke about. So we'll cover about 3 challenges. And then we'll get into some Q&A, and I think we have some networking after that, so it'll be a good time. Can everyone in the back, can you guys hear me okay? Am I projecting enough? Sweet. It's okay? A little bit louder? All right. So before I talk about myself, I want to just gauge the room real quick. So who here, they're just getting interested in product management, they don't really know what it is, and they want to know more about it? Put your hands up. All right, a few people. Who here is a full-time student? I always think that's pretty interesting. A few full-time students. Awesome. And who here is already a product manager or product analyst, something like that? All right, very cool. I'm still missing some hands, but I ran out of questions. So with that, anyone here a UX designer or a developer? All right, a few. Awesome. So with that, I'll get started. Walk you through a little bit of like my timeline up until now. So from like an early age, I was always a tinkerer and like I like to create things and build things, like Legos, like whatever it was. Okay. And so my first experience when I realized like I wanted to create something, be an inventor, something like that, is when in around 4th grade. Does everyone remember those rolly backpacks that people used to have? I was never lucky enough to have one. But at the time, I played the flute, believe it or not, and I was really good at it. And I had like a flute case with a strap, and I wanted to roll something around. And so what I had done was I hot glued a bunch of Hot Wheels cars to the bottom of the flute case, and then I was seen around the school dragging like this musical instrument behind me. And the reason I'm telling you that story was around 4th grade, that worked fine. My classroom was on the same level as the music class, so I just dragged it in. My music teacher looked at me weird every single time. And then next year, 5th grade, my classroom moved up. And so there were stairs between me and my music class, and I couldn't really drag this thing down the stairs. And we'll come back to why that's relevant a little bit later. So this theme of creating random things and try to make something stuck with me even till now, obviously. So when it was time to go to school, I tried to figure out how can I turn this into a career of some sorts. So I went to school for mechanical engineering. That was at Boston University. And when I graduated, my senior year, I got a job at Fidelity Investments. So very large financial services company and a very large employer in Boston. So when I got the job, it seemed like a great opportunity. It was a leadership development program, so very similar to a lot of the other companies that offer rotational programs within tech and within IT. So I took that role, and this is when I first got introduced to like technology, systems, and things like that. So I took the role as a systems analyst. We learned a lot about agile software development, soliciting requirements, managing sprints, things like that. But that was in Boston, and I'm from New York. Anyone here born in New York? New Yorkers, native New Yorkers? All right, sweet. So I really wanted to come back to New York. And so I started looking for jobs, and I'm like, where can I take what I know now and take that with me to New York? So I got a role at iPrio, a financial tech company right in this area. And I joined their mobile team. So at the time, iPrio was a fintech company focused on providing CRM systems and data to financial services industry. They didn't have anything mobile at that time. So I joined the team. It was me as a product analyst. I had a product manager that I reported to and a UX designer who worked alongside with me. And this was the first time I really got introduced to product management techniques. So we're talking, I did user research, I did wireframing, and I would survey our users and see, show one set of users one design, the other set of users another design, so A/B testing, see what the feedback was, and work with our designer, work with our product manager to iterate and improve what we're building out. So this was a really good experience, and I really enjoyed it. So in doing that, I learned more about market research. So the product manager at the time would really encourage us to download a ton of apps, even if you weren't going to sign up for it or whatever. Just download it, play around with it, see what the mobile trends are, because at the time we were building a mobile app, see what people in that space are doing. So we downloaded apps. The ones that stick out were TripAdvisor, Kayak, and in 2012, that was actually the first time I heard about Spotify. She really liked the Spotify app, so I downloaded it, and we saw what Spotify was doing and TripAdvisor and all these things. And we would look at these design trends and use that and apply it to our own application. So this is when I first started realizing, okay, this is something I'm into. This is something I could do. How much further can I go with it? At the time, when it came time to kind of move on and find something else, I started looking into consulting and how, can I take my career there? So I got a job at Deloitte Digital. So we were very much into systems implementation for large companies. So I fell in their customer experience business line. And we did a lot of, so the great thing about consulting is you go to different industries, you go to different clients. Within those clients, within industries, you see different lines of business. I've been in procurement, sales, customer service, all those things. But what I was doing there was really implementing a platform. So I worked a lot with Salesforce, and we implemented Salesforce at these various clients and for various things, sales, service, marketing, all those kind of things. So who here is a consultant in some capacity? Okay, because I know the invite said, talking a little bit about management consulting. So doing that right now, if there's anything more that you want to know about that transition, let's please do it in the Q&A. Keep your questions in mind. So I did consulting for a while, and as I was getting into it, I found myself thinking back to my time as a mobile analyst, and when I was just digging up apps and trying to just find industry trends, things like that, from a usability perspective, and I really enjoyed doing that. But I didn't really find myself doing that very much in consulting because there's a fixed amount of time, there's a fixed amount of money, and you just don't get to experiment as much because the more time you take, the closer to your deliverables you're getting, and it's hard to do that in consulting sometimes. So then I was like, all right, I want to make a move. What can I do? So I looked back at the three places that I had been at the time, Fidelity, Ipreo, and Deloitte, and I realized my experience there is pretty good package for becoming a PM. So I did the agile methodologies. I learned about market research, doing the UX user analysis and things like that. And then Deloitte, the consulting experience was great for learning how to manage stakeholders, manage expectations, manage time, and deliver on time. So I thought that was a pretty good package for becoming a PM. Apparently Spotify did too. And so here I am today, product manager at Spotify. So I was doing customer experience for a while. So over at Spotify, I am within our customer experience, customer support division, and I'm running a team there. So we have user, we talk to customers, user research, market research, user-centered, data, iterative development, and then prioritization, and using success metrics. So all of these things are super important. And what you can see here is that all these companies, so they're all in different industries, but the theme remains the same. So product management, permeates through all of these industries. We have Adobe for software, Spotify and Lyft, you could argue for tech, Bonobos for retail, and PIMCO financial services. They all require or all desire the same thing. So it's hard to define product management, but generally these are the things that stand out to me, and these are the things that I think about every day. So I found someone who gave a quick definition or a quick excerpt of what product management is that really stood out to me. So this is from an entrepreneur out west, Sachin Reiki. He's done a lot of talks on product management. So he says, product managers drive the vision, strategy, design, and execution of their product. And I think this is super important to think about the word drive here. Because as a product manager, you come up with your vision, you come up with your strategy, you collaborate on design, and execution is all up to you. And you have to drive these things forward in order for you and your team to really be delivering and making an impact. And making an impact is the most important thing here. So that said, I want to talk a little bit about product vision. So this is something that many product managers, at least in the area that I've been working, try to come up with and solidify. So your product vision, like what is that? So you have to ask yourself a few things. Why does your team exist, and what is the problem that your team is trying to solve? And how will you make your world, so when I say your world, a better place, I mean like your area. So if you're in retail, how will you make retail a better place? If you're at Uber or Lyft, how will you make the world of drivers and the world of passengers a better place? And so those are your end users, right? How will you impact them? And so when and a product vision, it doesn't have to define technologies. It shouldn't be defining technologies. It doesn't need to talk about what features you're going to make when. It's just, in general, it's the motivation behind you and your team building your product. Does that resonate with folks? Great. So, all right, so you have your product vision. What do you do with that? How do you get there? How do you get to your vision? That's with the product strategy. So your product strategy is how you get to your end vision. And for me, I look at it kind of like in two parts. So I look at your business and your user strategy. What does your business need to achieve, and what do you want to do for your users? So that's one part of it. But it doesn't end there. It's not all about what features you release, and it's not all about the coolest thing that you can get out and how fast you can get it out. The other side of things is your tech strategy, right? So how many times have you guys used an app and it takes too long to load? So you just close it, and maybe you find another one, you download something else that you think works better for you. So working on tech, you should have a tech strategy and take into consideration your technical debt, take into consideration your application's performance. Those things are equally as important to product management and your product strategy as your UI and things that people can see. In developing a product strategy, consider your overall business and customer needs. Make sure that what you think you should be doing is in alignment with what your business is doing. If your company is putting out a new, going after a new market or going after a new line of business altogether, make sure you ask yourself, okay, now how can my team impact that, or what does my team need to do for my company to be successful to get to that spot? And then continuous road mapping, because your business and your stakeholder needs, they're going to change. Your technology landscape is going to change. So what you decide your strategy is now and what your roadmap is going to be right now, that's going to look different 6 months from now, especially if you're in a rapid, very fast-changing environment like a startup. So you got to continuously check yourself and see if you're going in the right direction. And then I think this is the most important thing, and it's very difficult. I find it personally very difficult to continuously do, and that's measuring impact. And how do you know what you're doing is making you successful? And I find it hard to do that because every day I'm worried about, like, okay, we're releasing this thing, we got to get this out next week, next Friday, and I'm thinking about those things day to day. And sometimes when you're doing something, it's tunnel vision, right? So take a step back. In your strategy, you want to understand, how are you measuring, what KPIs are you using, what are you measuring against, and when you release something, how are you going to check that you move those numbers? How are you going to understand that you're successful? And know what failure looks like. Super important to not only know, like, hey, we did a good job, know what you didn't do well, and understand in your strategy how you're going to change that, how you're going to use that feedback to make change. Great. So we talked about vision, talked about strategy. That's all well and good, but what are you going to do now? So you have vision and strategy. So you need to execute effectively. So I think a big part about this is not only, you shouldn't sit in your room as a PM and just come up with your strategy. You need to involve everyone around you so that it just like it makes sense to all. So involve your stakeholders, communicate your vision and your strategy to them. And the main reason for this is to have them understand what you're doing, why you're doing it. And so the idea here is to influence them when they come to ask you for something. They come to scope creep, when they come with you to you with something, that it's in line with your vision and strategy. If they know what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go, they will come to you with better insights and better requests. And they'll fit in better with your roadmap, and you'll feel better about including that into your work when you didn't plan to originally. When it's applicable, communicate it to your customers and communicate it to your end users. I think it's most applicable here when you're like a B2B company. Maybe your customers are expecting something, or they want to make sure that you're going down a certain path before they use your tools. Let them know what your strategy is. Let them know, what you're aiming to achieve. That way, they gain confidence in you, and they gain confidence in your ability to deliver. And then, most importantly, communicate your vision and your strategy to you and your team. You got, for me and all PMs, you want to keep telling yourself what you thought you were going to be doing and what you're trying to solve, and make sure that you're staying on track with that. It's going to change, and that's okay, as long as you know why it's changing and you're aware as you go along that you're in control of the change. This is super key for you guys or for anyone to execute efficiently, effectively. So we use OKRs over at Spotify. That's something that Google came up with. So that stands for objective and key results. So objectives are ambitions. They're achievable, but they're ambitions. Those are things that you want to do. And key results fall under them. And those are the key results that you can measure and understand if you're hitting your objective or not. Super important. We talked about this a little bit ago. Data-driven design decisions. Use data to help you make your design. And then when you get that feedback, use that feedback to then influence the design again. So data is super key. We have a bunch of PMs in here, and I'm sure you guys are using data to drive your design, but you guys also know how that's sometimes very difficult to do, again, when you're caught up in trying to deliver all the time. User feedback, A/B testing, we talked about that a few times already today. Measuring impact, so know your KPIs, know how you're actually making a difference in what you deliver. And then continuous road mapping. Keep changing where you think you're going. Keep changing how you're getting to where you're going. And if where you're trying to go is changing, make sure you're aware of that and tweak your roadmap accordingly. So tweaking it, I'm going to go over here to the product development lifecycle, and we'll talk about that. So this is what something we have at Spotify called Think It, Build It, Ship It, Tweak It. This is kind of our mindset behind how we release things. And I know it might be kind of hard for you guys to see it in the back, but I'll walk you through it. So in the top left, when we have some sort of idea come about, we think about, is it worth even exploring this? If yes, let's go into the think it mode, and let's think about how we can execute on this. So you'll see a little scroll in the top where it says narrative and metrics. So you want to write your narrative and define your metrics. So we talked about that a little bit. And you want to understand, what is this thing that we're trying to build? What is it trying to solve? And how are we going to understand that it is solving that problem? Once you get to a point that you understand what that is and you determine that it's worth building, then you can start building it. So over on the top right, we're in the build it phase. And this is where a lot of that agile development happens. You're building it with your team. You're iterating and you're iterating. You're building it out. And then you get to this point where you have your MVP, your minimum viable product. And is it good enough for us to put it out there? Is it good enough to see, put our name on it and have people start using it? If that's yes, we go down to the bottom right where we're shipping it. And are we shipping it to everyone at the same time? Would that be a good idea? Got some shaking heads. So no, it's not the worst idea in the world, but you would not be able to get good insight from that. So ship it out to a percentage of your users. See how they react. So that's when the A/B testing comes in again. And then we have this little loop right here where we measure, we learn, and we adapt, and we test it again, and we measure it again, and we learn, and we adapt more. Once we get to a point where we feel like this is good enough for rollout, how do we know that it's good enough? Well, this feature fulfills the narrative, it passes the metrics, so that means, and we've tested it multiple times, so it's good to go. Then we roll it out. But we don't move on to the next thing right away. Sure, we've got other things, in Think It and Build It and shipping it, but we keep in mind that we just rolled this thing out 2 months ago. What's going on with it? Are people still engaged by it? What are they saying about it? Are we getting feedback for it? And that's where the tweak it continues to happen. And so you go from something that's like version 1, then you go 1.1, and then you're continuously revising it and making sure that you're sticking, and that you're creating a good product all throughout. Go for it.
So I'm reading a product management book right now, and one of the things the author talked about was design and engineering usually comes in like too late in the game.
Sure.
So I'm curious if you could give an example of how product and design were involved in the Think It process, or what's something you worked on.
Yeah. So we oftentimes design, we think about it not just from like a visual perspective. So oftentimes it's like process as well. So when we're just trying to visualize, try to scope out this particular feature, we have every group within Spotify has a designer, we have our developers, and we have a product team. So we'll get together with the design team and just talk it out. Like, what are the flows? What kind of behaviors do we expect from this particular feature? And we try to understand that first before we even have any sort of like wireframing or anything like that. So at least within my team, that's been my experience. Yeah.
And do you guys do like 2-week sprint cycles?
Every team's different. Like I'm right now doing 2-week sprint cycles, and I find that for my particular team, something else might actually work. So I think generally if teams are sprinting, they find the best way for them.
Is that Think It process within the 2 weeks?
So this could be outside of a sprint altogether. Okay. So this can be like, so that's the thing that's difficult, right? Like as a PM, you're always sprinting, but then you've also got all this analysis that you have to do for things that you might want to sprint for, right? So there's a lot of balancing going on there.
So you might like pull your team away from the sprint for like a meeting, like, hey, this is something we're going to figure out.
Yeah, and so you see product, tech, and design. So we may not be pulling away our developers, but we may be pulling away like the tech lead or something like that, somebody who knows what we need to integrate with and things like that. All right, so just take a little break here. So looking at these 4 things, we have coffee, we have your iPhone, we have music, and avocados. And one of them has to go. And you guys can never have this or use this ever again. Put your hand up if you're having a hard time figuring out which one to let go. Anyone else having a hard time? All right, I expected more hands, but so what I'm trying to portray here is a very large challenge, not a problem, but a challenge that product managers face. So Richard Banfield, he's an author of one of very popular product management books. He also runs his own product firm in Boston. He polled his product network and said, "What keeps you up at night?" And there's a very clear majority here, and I want someone in the room to maybe shout out what they think that might be until we get it. Anyone?
Prioritization.
Who said that? Yes. Prioritization. Number one challenge in my point of view, and apparently a lot of others. So what makes prioritization so challenging? It's that you've got this vision, you've got this roadmap, but you are, at the end of the day, a person within, you go to work, and you have colleagues that you want to work with, and you need to deliver not only for you and your product team, but for everyone in the business. So when people come to you with scope creep and other features that they want you to implement that you didn't even think that you were even going to start trying to analyze, how do you say no? So I try to just ask myself a few things. What makes this feature request more important than the others? And when looking at that ask, is this ask contributing to my product strategy and vision? Is it impacting our end users? Is it critical and is it critical to our impact on the business as a product team? So people might be coming to us with scope creep and whatnot, but it might actually be because the business is going in a certain direction, and we need to do something before, let's say, like maybe a regulatory deadline or something like that. That's important. So say yes if it makes sense. It's not that you have to say no all the time if it's not in your scope, or that you have to say yes all the time, but just say yes if it makes sense. And try to stick to your plan, because that plan you have has a vision and strategy behind it. So that's why it's important to draft that up and stick to it. Any questions on prioritization? All right. Challenge number 2, managing your team. So this is less about people management and more about expectation and vision management. So drive your team towards achieving a common goal, which is your vision. Make sure your team knows why you're doing what you say you're doing, and your team should know why you're sprinting towards these certain things. That allows them to understand the importance of certain things and use that in their design and use that in their development when they produce that. And your team is your best asset. I think a good team has great team members, but a great team has great team members that understand their mission and they understand what they're doing and why they're there every day. And I just want to point out again, like, product managers don't manage people individually. We don't usually manage people's careers and things like that. But we can influence the people that are on our team by giving them a good understanding of what they're there to do and why we're there and how we fit in with the business, how we fit in with our end users and maybe even like the public. And then challenge number 3, I'm not technical enough. Does anyone here feel that sometimes they may not be technical enough to get into product management or be in tech? Let's get a show of hands. A lot of people. All right, great. So number 1 thing, don't worry about that, because I mean, in my humble opinion, like, I don't feel like you need to know how to code and do those things to be a good product manager. But what you do need to do is strengthen your knowledge. And that's not to say that you're like trying to compensate for not knowing how to develop or not knowing about technology, but that's just you becoming a better person and a better product manager. So know your market, know your competitors, know your industry, get that knowledge, bring that forward, and that way you can develop insights when you're creating your product that can better serve you, your team, and your business. And educate yourself with the technologies that you're working with. So you don't need to get into like the deep down into like whatever it may be, like Node.js and things like that, but just understand generally what technologies your team are using and why they're using it and how it kind of works a little bit. So for example, I worked a lot with Salesforce in consulting. I didn't know anything about it when I started, but all my projects had to do with Salesforce. So I picked it up, understood how it worked, and that helped me a lot when I had to talk to clients and talk to stakeholders and things like that. And then understand your technical landscape. So if you are in a large organization, understand who the other PMs and the other teams are. Even if you're in a smaller company, understand who the other people in your position and who are the other people that can help you. Get to know them so that you can, like, if your team is trying to build something out and you're dependent on another team for some sort of database or some sort of insights or data, you know who to go to, and you've already developed that relationship. So they know who you are, you know who they are, they're happy to help you, and that really makes things go smoothly. Understand what systems and what integrations exist within your purview. Under the products that you manage, if you're integrating with other systems, understand what they are. Identify who uses those systems, who are the end users, who are the administrators, and again, know the teams behind that. And the reason for that is the more you know about all the technologies that you're using, doesn't mean you have to be technical, but the more you know about what you're doing, the more comfortable you will be with where you're working, and the more confident other people will be in you. So I think that's super important. You don't have to be technical to do that. You just have to be hungry to learn. And obviously everyone in this room is, so I think you can all definitely do that. And lastly, just hammering on this one more time, develop your relationships, know your stakeholders, know your end users, know your customers, and really drive those relationships and build them out. Because These are the people that you are influencing, that you are creating, products for, and the better you know them, the better products you can make. And so what you do and what you ship will matter. These are headlines from different publications and blogs and things like that, and they're all speaking about features, both positively, they're questioning others, things like that. So what you do will matter. People will talk about it, and if you want to be in product and be the best product manager that you can, be the best product person that you can be, so that if you end up in the headlines of something, people are talking about how awesome your product is. My name is Ashwin, and that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you very much.